Erev Shabbat Shalom Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Terumot. We are up to Perek Zayin, Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnot should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Tzvedlana Aranbai, ben Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam beGan Eden. Amen. Rabotai, is an introduction to this Mishnah. Later on in chapter 9, we are going to learn that if somebody plants seeds of Terumah by mistake, he must plow up the soil so that the seeds will not grow. If he did not plow it up and new plant grows, the new produce is considered terumah. Our Mishnah addresses whether those halachot would apply in the case discussed in the previous Mishnayot, where there were two boxes, one of terumah and one of chulin, and we do not know which box is which. The Mishnah says, Zara et achad men patur. If one planted the produce of one of the boxes, he is exempt from plowing it up, because since we are not certain that it is terumah, the rabbis do not require that it be plowed up. And when the new produce grows, it is not treated as terumah. And the Mefarshim explain, just like in the previous Mishnah, this Mishnah is speaking of where any possible terumah obligation is only the Rabbanan. For example, is speaking of terumah nowadays, and that's why we can be lenient. Vashniya noeg ba ki terumah, and the second remaining box of produce that he did not plant must be treated as terumah. V'chayevet bechala div Rabbi Meir. But at the same time, since the second box may be chulin, it is subject to the chala obligation if it is made into dough. These are the words of Rabbi Meir, the Rabbi Yossi Poter, but Rabbi Yossi says that the second box is exempt from the chala obligation, because since we are not sure if it is terumah or chulin, we treat it as if it were meduma, a mixture of terumah and chulin, which is not subject to chala. Zara acheret ashniya patur. If, the Mishnah continues, if someone else planted produce of the second box, he too is exempt from plowing it up. Just like with the first box, since we are not certain that it is terumah, the rabbis do not require that it be plowed up. Zara echad ishten. However, if one person planted the produce of both boxes, he has certainly planted terumah, and therefore the halacha of the new produce depends on the type of seeds that were planted as follows. Bidavar shezar'o chale mutar. Something whose seed decomposes when it is planted, like wheat or barley, is permitted to be eaten by a non-Kohen. But something whose seed does not decompose, like garlic or onions, it is forbidden to be eaten by a non-Kohen. And the Mefarshim explain the halacha of seeds that are midumah, which is a mixture of terumah and chulin that were planted, is subject to a number of factors. Basically, it depends on the type of produce as follows. If they are seeds that disintegrate into the ground, like wheat or barley, they do not need to be plowed up, because what grows from such seeds is chulin, since even if the seeds were terumah, the original terumah seeds will not remain. However, if they were seeds that do not disintegrate, like garlic or onion bulbs, they have to be plowed up. If they were not plowed up, what grows is terumah, since the original terumah seeds remain. So here too, even though one of the boxes certainly contained terumah, and he planted the contents of both boxes, it is considered like midumah, and the produce of seeds that will decompose would be permitted to a non-Kohen. And the Mishnah ended off by saying, something whose seed does not decompose, like garlic or onions, that would be forbidden to be eaten by a non-Kohen. Same thing here, the Mishparshim explained, the halacha is the same as someone who plants seeds that are midumah. Therefore, the produce of seeds that will not decompose is prohibited to a non-Kohen. That is in Rabotai, Perek Zayin, Mishnah Zayin. Perek Chet Mishnah Aleph discusses now, we know terumah may be eaten by a Kohen and a member of his household. This includes his wife, even if her father is not a Kohen, and his Canaanite slaves. So the Mishnah now is going to discuss several cases where a person was eating terumah that he was allowed to do, thinking that he was allowed to do so, and then he finds out that he's in fact eating, that he's forbidden to eat the terumah. The Mishnah says, a woman who was married to a Kohen was eating terumah. And people came and said to her, Med balech, your husband died, or girshech, or your husband divorced you, and therefore she's no longer married to a Kohen, and she may not eat terumah. And the Mefarshim explain, there are a number of ways in which a woman can get divorced without realizing it. One of the ways is if she made a messenger, a shliach, to accept a get from her husband for her. As soon as the agent left, as soon as the agent accepts the document, she would be divorced, even if she's not present, she doesn't realize that it happened. The Mefarshim explain our Mishnah's case. A woman might have told her shliach to accept a get from her husband in a place that's 10 days journey away. She assumes then that she's not going to be divorced for at least another 10 days, and therefore she eats terumah. However, the agent traveled faster than expected, than usual, and he accepted the get earlier. and therefore she's no longer married to a Kohen. She may not eat terumah, because again, the Mefarshim explain, we're talking about a case where her father is not a Kohen, and the only reason she was allowed to eat terumah was because she was the wife of a Kohen. Similarly, a Canaanite slave of a Kohen was eating terumah. And people came and said to him, Met Rabbecha, your master died and you were inherited by Israel. And the Mefarshim explain, when a slave's owner dies, his slave automatically passes to the possessions of his heirs. So if a Kohen owns slaves, obviously his sons who are Kohanim will inherit his slaves. But the Mishnah is referring to a case where the Kohen's heirs were not Kohanim. For example, he had no sons and therefore his daughter inherited the slave. Or his daughter married a Yisrael and they inherited his estate, including his slaves. Or they told him, your master sold you to Israel. Or your master gave you to Israel as a gift. Or your master made you a free man. In all of these cases, the slave no longer belongs to a Kohen, and therefore he may not eat terumah. And Mefarshim explain, these transactions can be done without the knowledge or the presence of the slave. Therefore, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the slave did not know that he was no longer the slave of a Kohen until he was told. Similarly, a Kohen was eating terumah, and it became known that he was the son of a divorced woman, or the son of a chalutza, a woman who performed chalitza, and therefore he is not a qualified Kohen, because the Mefarshim explain, the Torah in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 21, pasuk 7, forbids a Kohen to marry a divorced woman. A child born from such a union is disqualified from being a Kohen. He may not eat terumah, he may not serve in the Bet HaMikdash, even though his father is a Kohen. He is known as a halal. In our case, a Kohen found out that his mother had been divorced from a previous marriage before she married his father, who was a Kohen, and therefore he, the son, is therefore disqualified from being a Kohen, or is the son of a chalutza. The Torah tells us in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 25, psukim 5-10, that when a married man dies without children, the widow must marry one of his brothers. This marriage is known as yibum. She can also be released from the obligation by the ceremony of chalitza, removal of the shoe. But the Torah tells us the rabbis made a decree, Midrabanan, a Kohen may not marry a woman who performed chalitza. So if he marries such a woman, their child is disqualified from being a Kohen. He may not eat terumah, he may not serve in the Bet HaMikdash. And in our case, the Kohen found out that his mother had performed chalitza before marrying his father, and therefore he, the son, is disqualified from kihuna. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev keren v'chomesh, Rabbi Yehoshua poter. Rabbi Eliezer obligates the woman, slave, or disqualified Kohen to pay for the principal, the value of the terumah that he ate, and the extra fifth, just like any non-Kohen who eats terumah intentionally. Rabbi Yehoshua poter, but Rabbi Yehoshua exempts them from paying anything. But the Gemara tells us that in Masechet Pesachim, page 72b, that Rabbi Yeshua's ruling is limited to a specific case. The case is that it is the morning of Erev Pesach, and the woman, slave, or Kohen is eating chametz and is terumah. Since they have to finish the chametz before it becomes forbidden, they are in a rush, and they did not verify that they are still permitted to eat terumah. In this case, Rabbi Yeshua says they are not held responsible. They are treated as a non-Kohen who eats terumah for reasons completely beyond his control. Such a person, therefore, is not required to pay anything. However, even Rabbi Yeshua agrees, if the woman, slave, or Kohen was eating terumah on any other day, they are responsible and must pay the principal and the fifth. The Mishnah continues with another case where Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua disagree. A Kohen was standing and bringing offerings on the altar. V'nodashu ben grusha ben chalutza, and it became known that he was the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza, and therefore he is forbidden to serve in the Bet HaMikdash. Rabbi Eliezer says, all the offerings that he has ever brought in the Mizbech are invalid, since he was not an eligible Kohen, and therefore replacement offerings must be brought. But Rabbi Yeshua says that the offerings are valid. Rabbi Yeshua learns from a pasuk in the Torah, Sefer Dvarim, chapter 33, pasuk Yud Aleph. It says, Barech Hashem chelo afu al yadav tirtzeh, afilu chalal shebo pa'al yadav tirtzeh. Even a chalal shebo, even if the Kohen was found to be invalid, his handiwork is desirable. B'diavad, Rabbi Yeshua says that after the fact, if he did not know that he was disqualified, his service is valid. Nodashu balmum. However, if a Kohen was serving in the Bet HaMikdash and it became known that he had a physical defect that disqualifies him from serving in the Bet HaMikdash, everybody agrees avodato psula, that his service is invalid. The Mefarshim explain, a Kohen who has certain types of physical defects may not serve in the Bet HaMikdash. These defects are listed in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 21, psukim 19-20, and in the 7th chapter of Masechet Bechorot. Everyone agrees that his service will be invalid because there is no pasuk that teaches us that service performed by a Kohen with a defect is valid, and therefore even b'diavad his service is invalid, and The Rav brings us a pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 25, pasuk 12. Et briti shalom, kshu shalem, v'lo kshu chaser. The Chazal are now only when the coin is perfect in his physicality and he's not lacking, he doesn't have a physical defect. And the Rav tells us, V'alachak Rabbi Yehoshua, the halakha does follow Rabbi Yehoshua in these cases. That is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.